We need you to cancel your honeymoon and watch your sister's kids, Dad said. I was getting married in 72 hours. She scheduled her surgery for next week. Family emergency. The surgery was elective cosmetic. This is a test of loyalty, so I smiled and said, I failed. Then I blocked all of them and went to Bora Bora. When we posted photos, 147 missed calls. My name is Max, and I'm 33 years old. 72 hours before my wedding, my dad stood in my kitchen like he was delivering a court summons and said, We need you to cancel your honeymoon and watch your sister's kids. He said it in front of my fiancée and our wedding planner on speakerphone, like it was normal to draft me into unpaid labor while I was literally trying to finalize seating charts. To understand how we got there, I need to take you back to the beginning. I grew up in a house where love was measured in usefulness. My dad, Oleg, worked for the county for almost 30 years and carried that do your duty energy into everything, including parenting. My mom, Irina, was a nurse who could be warm in private, but in public she treated family like a brand that had to look perfect. And then there was my sister, Alina. Alina is 2 years older than me and has always been the sun in our family's solar system. She was loud, pretty, dramatic, and somehow always in a crisis that required immediate funding, babysitting, emotional support, or all three. Me, I was the kid who did his homework without being asked, who didn't get into trouble, who kept his head down. Adults love that kind of kid because you can ignore him and he still turns out fine. One of my earliest memories is being about 8 years old and sitting at the kitchen table with a science fair project I'd made out of cardboard and glue. I was so proud I could barely sit still. Alina came in crying because she didn't get the lead in a school play. My mom didn't even glance at my project. She swept Alina into a hug and said, My poor baby. And my dad looked at me and said, Max, clean up your mess. Your sister needs us. It was always framed like that. Alina needs. Max can handle. When I was 15, I made the varsity soccer team. My dad promised he'd come to my first home game. He didn't. Alina had a panic attack because a boy didn't text her back, so my parents took her for ice cream and called it family time. The next day, my dad patted my shoulder and said, You're tough. Your sister is sensitive. At 17, I got a scholarship offer to a good engineering program. I still remember holding the letter like it might float away. My parents were happy for exactly 1 minute, until Alina announced she wanted to find herself at a private college out of state that cost a fortune. Suddenly, my scholarship wasn't a win. It was convenient. It meant they could pour money into Alina and call it balanced parenting. The only person who ever said the quiet part out loud was my Uncle Victor, my mom's older brother. He wasn't rich. He wasn't flashy. He owned a small auto shop and smelled like motor oil and peppermint gum. He'd look at me over his coffee and say things like, You're not a spare tire. Max, don't let them keep you in the trunk. I used to laugh because it sounded like a weird joke. But he was the first adult who made me feel seen instead of managed. Fast forward. I did the whole responsible kid thing. I worked hard, got my degree, moved to the DC area, and climbed my way into a role that made my parents proud in the only way they understood, a job title. I'm an engineer by training, but I shifted into HR and operations because I'm good at people systems, compliance, and fixing broken processes. I work for an international company with offices across the US and Europe, and my job is basically half technical and half keep humans from suing each other. It's stressful, but it pays well, and I'm good at it. I live in Washington now. In a row house I'm slowly turning into a home instead of a crash pad. My fiancée, Elena, is the kind of person who actually enjoys planning. She planned our wedding like she was building a small, beautiful universe. I just had to show up and not mess it up, which, apparently, is too much to ask if you're my family. The older I got, the more the family pattern shifted from emotional favoritism to financial dependence. It started small, like it always does. When I was 24, my dad called and said, Alina is short on rent. Just for this month. You know how expensive everything is. I sent $600. It felt like the adult thing to do. 2 months later, it was, Alina's car needs repairs. She can't get to work. I sent $900. Then it was, your mother's credit card got a little high because of medical bills. I sent $1,200. I started noticing that medical bills somehow included spa visits and boutique receipts when my mom accidentally emailed me the wrong attachment once. When I asked about it, she got offended and said, Are you auditing your own mother? After everything we've done for you. That phrase, after everything we've done for you, was like a key that unlocked guilt on demand. Alina got married to a guy named Dennis who played the role of charming provider in public and confused helpless man in private. They had 2 kids, Masha and Lev, and suddenly every conversation became about childcare. Alina would call me crying because she was overwhelmed, and by the end of the call I'd be committing to taking the kids on Saturday so she could rest, and also sending money because Dennis's paycheck got delayed. Dennis's paycheck was always delayed, like it had a personal grudge. One year, I added it up. Between random transfers, paying for emergencies, and covering family shortfalls, I had sent about $24,700 in 10 months. That number made me feel sick, not because I couldn't afford it, but because I hadn't even noticed it leaving. It was like financial bleeding you don't see until the floor is slippery. I started keeping records. Nothing dramatic. Just a spreadsheet. Dates, amounts, who asked, what they said it was for. My uncle Victor would call me on Sundays and ask how work was going. One day I mentioned the spreadsheet like it was a joke. He didn't laugh. Good, he said. Paper beats poetry. Feelings won't save you when they rewrite history. At the time, I didn't fully understand what he meant. I would. When Elena and I got engaged, I thought, stupidly, that maybe the family dynamic would soften. Weddings make people sentimental, right? People talk about love and unity. They get teary. They behave. My family treated my engagement like an opportunity to negotiate my time and money. My mom's first question wasn't about Elena's ring or our plans. It was, will you make sure Elena has a role? She'll be devastated if she's not important. My dad's first question was, how much are you spending? Don't be wasteful. Meanwhile, my parents had just helped Elena upgrade to a bigger house because the kids needed a yard. They didn't have the money, but they had the confidence. The down payment was a loan from my parents' retirement account, which I found out about because my dad casually mentioned it and then asked me, in the same breath, if I could help replenish their savings. I asked Elena what she wanted our boundaries to look like, because she's smarter than me in the ways that matter. She said, your family treats you like a resource. I don't want our marriage to start with me watching you get drained. We agreed on something simple. We would pay for our wedding ourselves. We wouldn't borrow, and we wouldn't let anyone attach strings. We also booked our honeymoon early, because it was the one thing we both wanted to be ours. No opinions. No committee. No family needs. Bora Bora wasn't a random flex. Elena has a photo of those turquoise lagoons taped inside her childhood journal. She grew up in a small apartment and used to say she'd swim in water that looked like glass one day. So we did it. We saved. We planned. We paid the deposits. Between flights, resort, transfers, and excursions, the total was right around $23,600. Non-refundable past a certain date, which was, you guessed it, right before our wedding. The week of the wedding arrived like a wave. Last-minute meetings, final fittings, calls with vendors. My job was also in one of those chaotic periods where every global office suddenly remembered HR exists, so I was juggling compliance fires while trying to pretend I was calm. 72 hours before the wedding, my dad called. Not texted. Called. Which in my family meant something was serious. I answered because I was still that kid who cleaned up the mess to keep the peace. He didn't say hello. He said, we need you to cancel your honeymoon and watch your sister's kids. I actually laughed at first, because it was so ridiculous my brain treated it like a joke for self-defense. What? I said. Alina scheduled her surgery for next week, he said. Family emergency. Elena froze mid-step in our living room. She was holding place cards. I said, surgery? What surgery? My dad's voice got sharper, like my questions were disrespect. It's private. She needs support. Dennis has work. Your mother and I have appointments. You're the only option. I was staring at Elena, and she was staring back with that look that says, please don't do it. Please don't reflexively do it. I said, Dad, we're getting married in 3 days. I know, he said. That's why you have time. You can reschedule the honeymoon. Just call and move it. And if you can't, then you'll eat the cost. That's what family does. That was the first moment something in me clicked into place. He wasn't asking. He was assigning. And he was comfortable spending my money in his head. I said no. The silence on the line was immediate and heavy, like I'd slapped him. Then he did what he always does when he thinks he's losing control. He escalated. This is a test of loyalty, Max, he said. You can't start your marriage by abandoning your sister. Elena's mouth actually opened like she couldn't believe someone would say that out loud. I said, a test of loyalty, slowly, tasting the phrase. Okay. My dad heard something in my voice and tried a different angle. Your mother is very upset, he said. She says Elena is changing you. I looked at Elena. She didn't say a word. She just waited, like she was letting me decide who I wanted to be. I said, what surgery is it? My dad hesitated. Just a fraction. Reconstruction, he said. And that word was so carefully chosen it made my skin crawl. It sounded serious. It sounded noble. It sounded like a way to shame me if I didn't comply. But I've worked in HR long enough to know that when someone gets vague, it's because specifics would ruin the story. I said, send me the details. What hospital, what doctor, what paperwork? If it's a family emergency, I need to know what I'm walking into. He snapped, don't interrogate me. I said, then don't draft me. He hung up. 5 minutes later, my mom called, crying so hard it sounded performative, like she was reading a script she'd rehearsed. Max, please, she said. Your sister is scared. I said, what surgery? She doesn't want everyone to know, my mom sobbed. I said, Mom, I'm not canceling my honeymoon blind. What surgery? There was a pause, and then a softer voice in the background. Alina. She didn't sound scared. She sounded annoyed. Tell him it's my mommy makeover, she said, like she was ordering coffee. My mom hissed something at her, like she'd said it too loud. I blinked. Mommy makeover, I repeated. Alina grabbed the phone. It's not your business, Max. It's elective, yes, but I need it. My body is ruined. Dennis isn't attracted to me anymore. I almost lost my temper right then, but what I felt more than anger was clarity. Alina, I said, you want me to cancel a $23,600 honeymoon 3 days before my wedding to babysit because you booked cosmetic surgery. She snapped, it's not cosmetic. It's medical for my mental health. That's not how insurance codes work, I said, and then immediately regretted speaking like HR. My mom came back on the line and tried the guilt again. Max, your sister has done so much for you. I laughed, but it came out sad. Name one thing. My mom went quiet because we both knew the answer. Then my dad called back. Not to apologize. To threaten. If you don't do this, he said, don't expect us to show up for you. Something in me felt weirdly calm. Dad, I said, you're already not showing up for me. You're trying to take. He started yelling about respect, about family, about duty, and I let him talk because I wanted to hear the shape of the truth. It wasn't love. It was entitlement. While he was talking, I opened my spreadsheet. I scrolled. I saw the transfers. I saw the patterns. I saw myself shrinking year after year to keep them comfortable. Uncle Victor's words came back. Paper beats poetry. I texted him one sentence. They want me to cancel honeymoon to babysit for Alina's cosmetic surgery. He called immediately. Put it on speaker, he said. So I did. My dad was still lecturing me when Uncle Victor's voice cut through. Oleg, Victor said. Are you out of your mind? There was a stunned pause. My dad hated being challenged, especially by someone he considered beneath him. This is family business, my dad snapped. It became family business when you tried to steal his honeymoon, Victor said. Max is not your employee. He is not your nanny. He is not your bank. My mom tried to cry again. Victor, don't make this worse. Victor said, Irina, it's already worse. You're asking your son to pay the price for your daughter's vanity. Alina screeched, it's not vanity. Victor ignored her. Max, he said, tell them no. And send me your records. My dad barked, records? What records? And that right there was the moment I realized they'd never expected me to keep proof. They expected me to be grateful for scraps of approval and too ashamed to track the cost. I looked at Elena. Her eyes were shiny, but she wasn't crying. She looked proud and exhausted, like she'd been holding her breath for years and finally exhaled. My dad said, Max, this is your last chance. Do you choose your sister, or do you choose selfishness? He actually said selfishness, like my marriage was a hobby. And I could have argued. I could have explained. I could have begged them to understand. But I didn't want understanding anymore. I wanted freedom. So I smiled, even though they couldn't see it through the phone, because the smile was for me. I said, you said it's a test of loyalty. Yes, my dad said. I said, I failed. Then I hung up. I blocked my dad. Then my mom. Then Alina. Then Dennis. Then the aunt who always texted, family is everything. right after asking for money. My hands were shaking, but it wasn't fear. It was adrenaline, like I'd finally stepped off a ledge I'd been standing on my whole life. Elena whispered, "Are you okay?" I said, "I don't know, but I'm done." The next 72 hours were a blur. My family didn't show up to the rehearsal dinner. They didn't help. They didn't send a message. They had clearly decided that their absence was punishment. But the funny thing about boundaries is that once you stop asking for permission, punishment loses its teeth. My friends showed up. Elena's parents showed up. Uncle Victor showed up in a suit that didn't quite fit and a tie he clearly hated. He stood next to me like a guardrail. The wedding itself was beautiful. Small enough to feel real, big enough to feel like a celebration. When I looked out at the chairs and didn't see my parents, I felt a pinch of grief, because you always grieve the family you wanted. But then Elena took my hand and squeezed, and I felt the truth of what I was building. After the wedding, we got on a plane. Bora Bora felt like stepping into someone else's dream. The air was warm and salty, and the water was so clear it looked fake. Elena cried when we first saw the lagoon from the boat, and then she laughed at herself for crying, and then I laughed too, because I'd never seen her that free. We took photos on the overwater bungalow deck. We ate fruit that tasted like sunlight. We swam at night with the lights under the water glowing like a private galaxy. On the second day, Elena posted a picture of us in the water, her head on my shoulder, both of us sunburned and smiling like idiots. I didn't think about my phone. I didn't check. I didn't care. Then, later that afternoon, I opened it out of habit. 147 missed calls, dozens of voicemails, texts from numbers I hadn't blocked yet, because apparently my family had recruited cousins like a call center. One message from my mom, from a new number, said, "How could you do this to your sister? She is in pain. You're ruining the family." One from Elena said, "If something goes wrong in surgery, it will be your fault. I hope Elena is worth it." Another from my dad said, "When you come back, you will apologize. You will make this right." And there it was again. The assumption. The ownership. Elena saw my face and said, "What is it?" I handed her my phone. She read the messages quietly. Then she looked up and said, "Do you want to respond?" I said no. I blocked the new numbers. We went back into the water. I won't pretend I didn't think about them. I did. At night, when it was quiet, I imagined my mom telling people a story where I was the villain. I imagined my dad's anger fermenting. I imagined Elena making herself the tragic heroine in a situation she created. But I also imagined something else. I imagined what it would feel like to stop being available for being used. When we got back to Washington, reality hit like cold air. There were more calls, more messages, more family members suddenly very invested in unity. One cousin wrote, "Your parents are devastated. They paid for everything for you growing up." I almost replied with my entire childhood in one paragraph, but Victor's voice echoed in my head again. Paper beats poetry. So I sent one sentence. "Please direct any further communication to my attorney." Yes, I got an attorney. Not because I planned to sue them for emotional damage or anything dramatic like that. I got an attorney because I've learned that people who feel entitled to you don't stop at guilt. They escalate. They show up at your house. They call your job. They try to create consequences. My attorney helped me draft a simple notice. No contact, no harassment, no showing up at my home or workplace, and any attempts would be documented. Uncle Victor also helped me do something practical. We went through my financial records and closed every open pipe. The family phone plan I'd been paying for, because it was easier, gone. The monthly help payment my mom claimed was for utilities, gone. The credit card I'd co-signed years ago because my dad said it would build family credit, closed. And then we did the hardest part. We pulled my bank statements and matched every transfer to the spreadsheet. It was worse than I remembered. In the last 2 years alone, I'd sent just under $25,000. That 22 to 25K range I used to vaguely estimate in my head wasn't me being dramatic. It was real. It was money that could have gone to my own emergency fund, my own home repairs, my own future kids. When I saw it all lined up, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt embarrassed. Not because I helped, but because I let helping become my identity. My family reacted exactly how you'd expect. First came rage. My dad left a voicemail from an unknown number calling me ungrateful and saying he'd never forgive me. Then came bargaining. My mom tried to show up at my house on a Saturday morning with pastries like she was resetting the scene. Elena opened the door, stepped outside, and closed it behind her, which is a small thing that somehow meant everything. She didn't invite my mom in. She didn't offer a chair. She just stood on the porch, calm. My mom said, "I just want to talk to my son." Elena said, "You can talk to his attorney." My mom's face twisted like Elena had slapped her. "You're turning him against us." Elena didn't raise her voice. "No, you did that." My mom started crying, and Elena didn't move. My mom finally left, furious that tears didn't work. Then the relatives who took their side arrived. An aunt, a family friend, someone who hadn't said my name in years, all suddenly concerned. They all used the same lines. "Your parents are older. Your sister has children. Family is family. You'll regret it." I started answering the same way every time. "I'm not discussing it. Please talk to my attorney." It made people so mad, which was honestly how I knew it was working. They didn't want a boundary. They wanted a debate they could win with guilt. The weirdest moment came 2 months later when I found out, through a cousin who still spoke to me, that Alina's surgery went fine. Not life-saving. Not tragic. Fine. She posted selfies after her recovery, talking about healing and self-love, and in the comments she hinted about toxic people who don't support mothers. I stared at the screen and realized something that changed how I saw everything. My sister didn't want support. She wanted control over the narrative. She wanted the power of making me jump. My dad didn't want family unity. He wanted obedience. My mom didn't want peace. She wanted appearances. And I didn't want to be the guy who funded and fixed their choices while they treated me like a disposable tool. The last time I heard my dad's voice was through my attorney. He wanted to mediate, which in my family means you apologize and we pretend nothing happened. My attorney told him no. After that, it got quieter. Not magically, not all at once, but quieter. Elena and I started living like we weren't waiting for the next emotional invoice. We cooked dinner without checking our phones every 5 minutes. We spent weekends doing boring, happy things like walking through farmers markets and arguing about paint colors. Uncle Victor came over one Sunday and helped me fix a stubborn cabinet hinge. He didn't say, "I told you so." He just worked beside me in comfortable silence. At one point he leaned back, wiped his hands, and said, "How do you feel?" I thought about it. I thought about Bora Bora water and 147 missed calls. I thought about my dad's test of loyalty. I thought about my mom's tears like a weapon. I thought about my sister's entitlement dressed up as emergency. And I said the honest thing. "I feel lighter," I told him. "And I hate that it took this long." Victor nodded. "It takes as long as it takes." That night, Elena and I sat at our small dining table and signed papers for something boring and adult, updating beneficiaries, organizing our accounts, making sure our future was protected. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't dramatic. But it felt like peace. I used to think walking away meant I was cruel, that it meant I was giving up, that it meant I was failing some invisible exam everyone else passed naturally. Now I see it differently. Walking away wasn't revenge. It was survival. Boundaries aren't punishment. They're truth with consequences. And real family isn't who can demand the most from you. It's who shows up with respect, who treats your life like it belongs to you. I didn't go to Bora Bora to spite anyone. I went because I was getting married, and I chose my wife, my future, and my own self-respect. If that meant I failed their test, then honestly, good. I choose who gets a front row seat in my life now. This story is about the moment family emergency becomes code for your life doesn't count, and the relief when you finally choose yourself. Max isn't selfish. He's exhausted. For 33 years, he absorbed chaos because his family assigned him one role: the fixer, the bank, the one whose needs don't count. His parents measured love in usefulness. His sister measured it in access, demanding he cancel a $23,600 honeymoon for elective cosmetic surgery wasn't about childcare, it was about power. His father's test of loyalty revealed everything. Loyalty meant Max's unilateral sacrifice while funding his sister's choices. When he said, "I failed," he rejected a rigged game he'd played since childhood. This story teaches us, family emergency loses meaning when everything becomes an emergency except your boundaries. Max's family weaponized urgency to bypass his consent. Real emergencies don't require manipulation. If they can't ask without guilt, it's not help, it's extraction. The people angriest about your boundaries benefited most from you having none. The 147 missed calls weren't concern. They were raged that their designated resource shut down. They weren't upset he went to Bora Bora. They were upset he stopped being available for use. Walking away isn't cruelty when staying requires you to abandon yourself. Max didn't punish his family. He chose his wife, his future, his dignity over people who only valued him when he bled himself dry. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let people experience what life looks like when you stop volunteering to be their solution.